rereading some of the old slogans from like the 1800s and things like that. Because as we were talking about earlier, my grandfather's house, when you first walked in, he had this display box, and when you turned it, there were all these political buttons on there. Now imagine I'm a 5-year-old, 6-year-old kid reaching up and turning, and I'm learning how to enunciate names like Spiro T. Agnew or Richard Milhouse Nixon, and I'm like 5 learning all this. And so that always did something to me as a kid, and I always say, oh, I used to love just looking at that box when I was a kid and just learning the names. And then when you go to school, you can kind of brag and tell the teacher that you know this name, and the teachers look at you like, how is he so smart? Just pay attention to what's around you. So,
Big sister Natasha wants to know if you'll explore the African diaspora in this ongoing work. Will you incorporate your experiences from your trip to Egypt? Oh, and by the way, congrats again, Shea.
that's my big sister.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely, Tasha. Why am I yelling?
You can hear me right here.
Like, yeah, Tasha. Absolutely, Tasha. I'm yelling over there. It's like, absolutely. I have sketchbooks of the trip to Egypt that are in one of the books here, and doing something to bring it all together may be part of the resolution in the end. The diaspora. What does it mean to be a black man in America, considering the history and all the other things that have happened to us? What does it mean for me personally? What does it mean in the legacy of my family? I come from a really large family, the Masons, on my maternal side. And so maybe that will be part of it, is just summing it up. But like I said, I'm still a little bit conflicted. I haven't really given it much thought.
We have a question from David Mendikoff. Hey,
Another Anytown person. That's why y'all laugh.
Big fan and former Anytown counselor David. Are there any themes that you consider to be too challenging for you to put into your art? What themes that you've dealt with have been the most personally satisfying for you? Oh, and love and congrats.
Personally satisfying. Comparing the reality and the experiences on a personal level with my family and my parents and things like that to what's going on around in the world around us, I guess, is personally satisfying. I'm probably one of the only artists who would actually compare his mother to Vice President Cheney and the reality of the world. And I'm not saying that, I'm absolutely not saying it to be funny, even though people laugh, yeah. But that health challenges, his health care is 500 times better than what hers is.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so the point of just like, it's almost like her story is the American story in that, you know, we're always last in the race for survival and the race to thrive, but yet we still have that strength. That's one of the reasons why my mom is one of the people I admire as much as I do. That and giving birth and raising and all that. If there's something I don't want to touch or I'm uncomfortable with touching, I don't want to offend when it comes to issues, challenges, experiences of women. Because it could be really arrogant and presumptuous if I started to make this narrative about how I think women should be, behave, act, this, and this, because that's like a slope that sometimes guys can get into. I mean, it's obvious I have women included and stories and things like that in here, but it's almost like you don't want to say, well, here's how I'm telling you all what to think or how I'm going to decide these things. So I mostly keep it on a personal level as a black man and as a person who's 50 and who's grew up in Boston and all those kinds of things. I try not to impose myself. It's the same with people in the LGBT community. I don't want to try to impose on them. What I believe in is intersectionality. Their experiences, you know, their experiences they catch in hell just like I'm catching hell in a lot of ways. But I would never want to try to impose and say, this is how you should think and feel. I agree with a lot of things, but I don't feel right trying to force it and impose myself in that way on people. Yes?
I think this is a connected question. I'm curious what might be left out of the scrolls that was too personal and too hard that you were, were there things that you felt like you were crossing a line if you did you self-select certain things out? Because they were too hard.
Personal, when my brother Sean died, I didn't want to put that on, or write about it, or reflect on it in there. That hurt too much, and it was too painful for me to, even now, I can talk about him, but I don't want to personalize it and say, okay, let me write about Sean and put him in this as a character in this or something like that, because I feel like it would kind of be uncomfortable and awkward to do that. Relatives I've lost, I don't want to do that or reflect it in that way in the artwork. So I'm very hesitant to do that, if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it's less about the personal, but are there political things that are, like, you were too angry, or, that you didn't want to put in because, or is, is
Oh,
as
no.
much of you out there as can be?
I don't think I've censored myself in that way, but you know what, I haven't really, when I'm working on this kind of thing, I don't really think about the consequences of people seeing it, because this is like the first exhibit of this I've had in like 9-10 years or something like that. It's been a long time. So when I'm working on it, I don't think about it. I just try to be mindful of certain things. But for the most part, it's unfiltered. It's just my opinion, my thoughts, my observations, and a lot of political stuff that I'm learning. So that's what it is. But I try not to say, well, this is the end all be all, because I end up with more questions than I do answers. And as I said to someone earlier, I'm not old enough to have all the answers. No one is. No one really is. Yes.
So out of all the
How
content.
were you influenced, do you think, by growing up in Boston?
How am I influenced by growing up in Boston? I grew up in Roxbury in the 70s, during the busing era. There were some moments that were really, really uncomfortable. The Ted Landsmark photo haunted me for a long time, which I'm sure haunted a lot of kids. And it was weird, because I had a flashback to that when Mel Gibson did that movie where he was stabbing someone with the flag. What was that movie?
The Patriot?
Yeah, it like brought it right back to me when they showed him charging with the flag.
So should we put that, so for people who don't know, Ted Landsmark, who's a very wonderful man, was architect and civic leader, was on City Hall Plaza, and a man tried to stab him with the American flag during the 70s, right? So that's the iconic image. Dana Chandler has used that image. So that's the image that he's referring to, right?
So that visually,
Yeah.
I loved the murals that were in Roxbury when I was growing up, because Dana Chandler was like a role model for me. I loved his murals. As a matter of fact, when Quest Burns right there. Yeah, when they hired him, he's one of the best artists out here. Thomas Quest Burns there. The high school I teach at hired him, the MECO program, to do a mural celebrating Roxbury, Boston, and Roslindale. And when he did it, I helped him. I don't want to say helped him, but I contributed.
You did.
I repainted Knowledge is Power, Stay in School, Dana Chandler's original mural, because it had gotten painted over down Dudley Square. So it's now permanently hanging up at Lincoln Sudbury Regional High School. But that's partly, I was like, oh, that mural meant too much for me when they got rid of it. So now it permanently hangs up at the high school.
Your cousin Renard has a question. Out of all the content,
I'm not going to yell over in that direction. I keep doing that.
out of all the content you incorporated into your scrolls, which in particular were inspired by Grandma and Grandpa, and why? Congratulations from your cousin.
His nickname's Football. Football. If you look at the video, the video that's on YouTube, but there's a section on there there's another documentary on there that a former student of mine, Amelia Cordisi, did, called Wasted Time, with a question mark, because I had said, I don't know if this is wasted time or not. There's an image of my grandfather that starts it. And as I mentioned earlier, since he was such an antique collector and he liked saving so many things, it just served as an inspiration to me and a jumping off point. And when we were children and we used to visit my grandparents, and we went upstairs, and you're probably too young to remember, but you this is my cousin.
Yeah.
They had pictures of my mom and them in high school, and I always liked her senior yearbook photo. So I've incorporated, it hangs up over my desk at work, and I've incorporated in this, and I was just like, oh, that's a really cool picture, Mom. So just seeing things and saving them, that connects me to family, because at the end of the day, you can talk about Afghanistan, and you can talk about Iraq, and you can talk about all these wars and all these horrible crimes against humanity that comes out and that you learn. But in order to get over the depression and the sadness and turning into a cynical person, you gotta turn towards family. You just do, because family will help you make sense of a lot of stuff. And so sometimes I like to think, when you look at this in its entirety, I have to take a pause. I have to take a pause and write about something else. That's why you see Pat Robertson and John Ashcroft, but then I start writing about VH1's I Love the 80s and how I used to enjoy Joni Loves Chachi, even though they were lasted one season. Got to get out of that mindset. So that's where some of these things pop up.
Any more questions or
Yeah,
comments?
we have one, I think an easy question.
Okay.
Mercy Robinson. Are you or have you cataloged your scrolls digitally?
Digital.
Thanks to Lee Weinstein, who's a wonderful friend of mine. He also invented laser tag. The 1 hour one is on YouTube.
Yeah, it's right here.
Yeah, you can see me, you can hear me narrate it. If you fast forward it to the very end, or go close to the end.
Further.
Yeah, this is the one that's in the display case here. You'll see the presidential candidates, the Occupy movement. As that was going on, I used to go over to them in South Station to try, get sketching, write stuff down. Keep going all the way closer to the end, like as close to the end as you can get. A little bit back. That was me and Lee as we were video shooting, or as he was shooting. That's my mother in her high school year.
Oh, how beautiful.
How would you find this video online?
It's on, if you go onto our webpage, it's listed there in the press release and on the Facebook gallery.
My class is using this as a reference video.
Oh, wow.
And so as I continue.
So only one has been documented, it looks like, so more, they all need to be, the one particular finish would be great to get.
That was took us several hours, and that's like a year and a half worth of it. So what he did was he photographed it, and he had these laser pointers to help as we were pulling it sideways and sideways, right here. And then he found a way to stitch it all so that there's no breaks. There's absolutely no breaks in it. And that took, I'm assuming like 6 or 7 hours, something like that. And that was for my thesis, graduate school thesis at Art Institute Boston.
So if anyone wants to help do that, they can reach out to Shea.
Good weekend, Thanksgiving break,
weekend.
Christmas.
That'd be really great.
Because I'm thinking that was like 2011, 2012,
Yeah,
and I'm
so
like,
everyone-
oh God, oh God.
Or if a museum wants to purchase them at some point, then make a digital copy, that'd be great too.
Go holler.
That's right, good.
Yes, holler.
Holler, just holler. Is that it? Are we, anybody else? Is it a wrap?
Yeah.
I think it's a wrap.
Well, thank you both.